Good morning, everyone. Kate Flora and Fiona Pearman, authors of Core Confidence, joining you this week to talk a little bit around this year's International Women's Day theme, which is Choose to Challenge, Fiona.
Yes, never has there been a more timely theme for this particular topic. And I think, as we look at all that's playing out in our current landscape, it's a really great time for organisations, for leaders, and for each of us individually to start to think about, so what do we mean by this notion of choose to challenge? What's at stake? What's happening? And, is it actually possible, or, can we challenge in a way that's going to land and actually make a difference?
Yeah, I think when I first heard the theme, and we've been doing lots of writing articles on LinkedIn, so we'll make sure some of those links are pasted or shared in the Facebook page. Oh, here she comes. This piece around challenge by definition feels quite negative, right? Like it's if you're going to challenge someone, it's often feels like you're making them wrong. Who's right, who's wrong? It feels like on some level it can be of an attack nature, and so you're immediately, if you're challenging someone, and even the Google definition alludes to this a little bit, means that someone's going to defend, and then you get into this dynamic that certainly, if I'm to think about, am I putting my hand up to run down and challenge someone in a conversation or in a corporate environment? It's not something that feels particularly easy to do, pleasant to do, or actually, even how do you do it in a constructive way? So I think the inherent language is difficult, and I think it's important as we think about this, and of course you can do it in various different ways, but as we think about this, particularly orientation of all our work is, how do you do this in a way that's purposeful, that's done with meaningful and positive intention, and in a way that's a really good experience for the individual who is challenging, and also the individual who's experiencing it.
Yeah, we've got such a long background here of not having good ways to do this, of communication going awry, of trying to do the right thing, but it, really falling flat or missing the mark. And exactly as you're talking about, people getting defensive and angry and that sort of thing. So we know this is a vexed problem. It's not something that is done easily. And the more we're prepared to dig in and see what would need to be necessary, what would we need to do differently, that our message would actually land and people could hear what we're saying. And so I think, we talk a lot about, can you challenge with compassion? How can you hold good intention for yourself and the other person? And if you see someone, doing something that's inappropriate to another member of staff, if you see them making a sexist joke, or, rolling their eyes at something they've said, or, things that can seem quite small, but if you can catch those small things early, if you're prepared to call that out in a way that, doesn't blame and shame the other person, but at least makes it clear that, we just don't accept that kind of behavior around here. It's not what makes our organisation tick. It's not the way we like to do business here.
Yeah, I think that's a really good one for as long as I can remember us talking about how do we lean into addressing some of the challenges around bullying and harassment. We always talk about start small, have the small conversation, and sometimes that's having the conversation that maybe you don't actually think you need to, but actually let's have that one rather than the one that comes 5 steps later, which is going to be really uncomfortable. So let's start small. And I've been in those situations where I've been, perhaps language has been used around me, and I wouldn't say I'm particularly, it didn't bother me particularly, but I was just really mindful in that moment, as some of the, and look, it was blokey talk that was going on, was, if I don't hold a boundary here, what comes next? And actually what comes next and what comes next after what's next feels a whole lot more comfortable if I'm to forecast forward around that conversation. So actually, if I hold the boundary here in a light way, in a way exactly as you said, that isn't about making them wrong or anything, but saying, hey, you know what, kind of not okay to use language like that around me. It's just not appropriate. And please don't do so in the future. Immediately I've put a boundary. And look, it's not absolute, but you're kind of sending a message that says, hey, that's the line, don't go any further or don't cross it any further. And so I think there's a lot to be said around those small, yes, uncomfortable conversations, but done with intention, done with purpose, and done in a really positive way.
Yes, yeah, I'm really, reminded that, it's hard to stay neutral. It's hard to stay untriggered. It's hard to stay non-reactive when we see things that are confronting, or if we hear stories or someone comes to us with something that definitely shouldn't have happened at work and that sort of thing. And, there's a really important piece here about how we go about the next step, how we land that is going to make all the difference. And as you're saying, if we can get this early, it will set a new tone. It will change the direction of the conversation. It will mean that as an organization, we're not prepared to accept that kind of behavior. I mean, obviously, if something really terrible has happened, and we've heard about that recently in the media, then there does need to be some really far more serious consequences and processes. But I think what we are trying to advocate for is, how can we be on the front foot for this? How can we make sure that early on in the piece that we just don't get down a rabbit hole of where truly, disastrous and things with lifelong consequences are happening? How can we hold each other well to account without having to make it nasty and really detrimental? How can we do that and then ensure that actually we're a place where we know what the standards are, and we're not going to go down a slippery slope that means, that the next thing, as you're saying, is much, much worse.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think, this piece around start small, start early, quite important. Make it about the behavior, not the person. And I think just the piece, I want to pick up on something you talked about, it's hard not to be triggered. We talk a lot about, it's not just what you say and do, it's how you show up and be. And so, if the words coming out of your mouth are neutral, but your energy and your state is not, and it's basically, if your body and energy is saying something very different to what your mouth is, it will be received in that same way, in terms of with the intention and energy that's coming. So I think it's really important to be able to do the work so that we feel that we're in a good state to have the conversation in a constructive way. And, that piece around, just staying neutral, staying calm, offering perspective, not about right or wrong, but actually, offering an invitation to, and we love, and it's actually in this, it's about to go out on Thursday, in the newsletter, Catherine Fox's kind of mirror that she holds up or encourages people to hold up, which is, what do you mean by that? Or could you say that again when, if in a situation where something gets said and it's like, actually give someone the opportunity to just double check and say, you sure you want to put that on the table? And again, light ways that have people just check and go, actually, I've given a chance now to say exactly what I mean by that. There's the invitation for me to either explicitly say, which is the meaning we often grab onto, or actually auto-correct a little bit and go, this is what I actually mean. And I think that's when we talk about compassion. That's when we're coming at things with, positive intent, that actually we're not assuming that someone his purpose or intention was negative to us. We actually kind of come and say, hey, let's just press pause for a second, check in. I think all of that's really important.
Yeah, and it's those moments when it's done well that raises a level of consciousness. This whole piece about, if you go in and you slam into someone, they will just immediately contract, they'll get defensive, they won't have any space or room to move with it. Whereas when they're invited, there is actually an opportunity, their consciousness can be expanded, they can think about something differently. And, all those micro moments add up, to a maxi in terms of the culture that we're holding for. So really want to encourage people to challenge and to do it in a way that lands well and doesn't feel as though it's going to be, really detrimental to you or to the other person.
Yeah, so let's leave it there. If you've enjoyed today's confidence conversation, please share it with your network or anyone who you think might be interested in the conversation. And of course, if you'd like to go deeper with your relationship with Core Confidence, please visit our website, coreconfidence.com.au.